Boker Tov to everybody. Thank you for joining us as we continue Be'ezras Hashem, Likutei Moharan Amud Yomi. So like I mentioned yesterday, in a much more general Hakdamah, the first couple of days we're going to try to be going through from Nosson's Hakdamah, and hopefully it won't be Amud Yomi, it'll be Amudim, because it's a couple of pages long, and I do want to try as best as we can to get through it over the next couple of days, because it's extremely important before jumping into the Sefer. Other people are saying, let's jump into Torah Aleph. The Hakdamah is in the Sefer for a reason, obviously, and it's, as you're going to see, Be'ezras Hashem, it's an incredible Hakdamah and incredibly important to help center us and focus us before we set out on our journey. So we began with the Hakdamah yesterday just a little bit, and today hopefully we'll be able to go through half of it, if not most of it. Be'ezras Hashem. So we are currently, if you take a look in the first column over there on the right-hand side, we are up to Ki'ach. No, actually, v'chol. Yeah, v'chol. So Rabbi Nosson is saying over here, let's jump right in. V'chol Torah v'Torah shegila la'am segula. Let's try to mute. If everybody's joining the call can mute themselves. Thank you very much. V'chol Torah v'Torah shegila la'am segula. Each and every Torah, because each lesson in Likutei Moharan is not called a siman, even though in Likutei Halacha sometimes Rabbi Nosson makes reference to a siman lamed vav, siman lamed gimel, siman samach vav. But generally we refer to them as Torahs. Torah Aleph, Torah Beis, Torah Gimel. Torah just means teaching, right? So sometimes people get confused with Torah Aleph, Torah Gimel, there's one Torah, right? Obviously. But in Likutei Moharan, each lesson is called a Torah. So Rabbi Nosson says, V'chol Torah v'Torah shegila la'am segula. Each and every lesson that Rabbi Nachman revealed to Am Yisrael, kulam aleim eitzes niflois v'neirois la'avodasai ha'amitis yizbarach. They are all absolutely saturated with wondrous advice. Thank you so much for joining us. Wondrous eitzes and advice la'avodasai ha'amitis yizbarach, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu for real. Let's try to pack in some chairs in the back. Maybe if the chaver can sort of scooch in and move in. Kasha yira haraya be'einav, like Rabbi Nosson says, we mentioned yesterday, like the person who wants to see will see, right? It's just demonstrable. It's there in the Sefer. You don't have to prove it. You can just see it in yasim libay aleim be'emes la'amitai. But a person has to show up authentically, honestly, willing to learn. If a person is here to challenge, and so then we're not going to see it. But if a person is sitting with humility, saying, okay, I want to get close to Hashem for real, it's not an intellectual exercise. I'm here actually to find a derech, to find a path that's going to take me to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's arms. This is the Sefer for you. Ki achla zehoisa kavanah hakdash, says Rabbi Nosson. This was Rabbi Nachman's kavanah, la'or yeshenim, to awaken those who are asleep. Lahakitz nerdamim. It's good to learn this at 6 a.m. Lahakitz nerdamim. The whole thing is to wake up those who are slumbering. Leheshir libais b'nei adam, to straighten out the hearts of the human being. Achenu b'nei Yisrael, of all of Am Yisrael, Elav Yisbarach, and to bring them toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you just close the door, thank you so much. Leimar la'asurim se'u, to say to those who are trapped, se'u, leave. La'asher b'chayshech, to those who are in darkness, higalu, be redeemed. L'fkayach einayim ivros, to open up the eyes of the blind, l'hoitzi asurim b'kosharos, and to redeem those who are in shackles and fetters, l'hoitzi mimasker asir, to free from prison the one who is trapped, mibeis kele yoshev chayshech, again, people who sit in jail, those who are sitting in darkness, ha'asurim b'tavoseim, people who are trapped in taivas and desires to the Yetzer Hara. That's what the whole Sefer is here to free us, to absolutely free us, to free us from prison.
Why all these repetitive words?
Each one is if a person was really learning it properly, each one has a different mashmais. Let's also, if we can, let's try to keep questions to the end, just so we can get through it as quickly as possible. And those who are stuck in hevel and vanities, and those who are lost or forlorn, feeling lost in their sins, to turn their hearts toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to turn their hearts toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu in truth, in a way that's straight, in a way that's true. In the path that our fathers have walked for generations. That's why I said yesterday, Rabbi Nachman said, take my hand and I'll take you on a new way, but it's not a new way. It's really a very, very ancient way that just got lost throughout the generations as exile intensified. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent toward the very end of exile, the last 300 years, great luminaries, great lights, who are able to bring to us the light of the Geula, to free us, to enable us to get ready for the ensuing redemption, Be'ezras Hashem. Vihine. Says Rabbi Nosson, even though you can learn Likutei Moharan as we're going to try to do Be'ezras Hashem, I call it Ian Kal, really to do an Amud Yomi, you can do more than an Amud Yomi. If I was reading this pace, we can do 2 dafim in an hour, right? So we're going to do an Amud, and hopefully the style will be it, and it'll probably take a couple of days to work it out. I'd like to do the full Amud just shot, and then go back, and focus a little bit Ian Kal on some of the ideas to explain them. But Rabbi Nosson says you're able to understand Likutei Moharan in a way of pshutan shel dvarim, just to literally understand the words and their simple meaning. Af al pikei, but even so, oid dvarim begai. There are many, many deeper layers. Ki kiflayim l'soshia. Rabbi Nachman did something, he doubled it over in his strength. Ki adayin pnimius hadvarim stumim v'chasumim ein kol. The sefer has nigla, the sefer has nister, and the nister of the sefer is absolutely hidden. Chasum me'ein kol, from everybody, no matter how great a tzaddik, no matter how deep a makubal, the words are impenetrable. And what Rabbi Nachman actually meant in his soidos are, a person spends their whole life just on one lesson. Mamish. Because like he began with, these are the words and matters that were hidden by the Ancient of Days, by Kutchabrichu, by Hashem. The Rabbi Nachman does both. He reveals them by hiding them, and he hides them by revealing them. In order to bring them into this world, he had to clothe them and put them into garments. Now, those garments, just like a person's actual clothing, which is going to become a theme that we learn many times, Be'ezras Hashem of the Likutei Moharan, which is a big teaching, right? Which let me just finish the sentence here. Ki amichse hu hagiloi akubavor mezabekis ve'arizal. There's a lesson from the Ari that's showing up again and again in the Likutei Moharan, that the concealment is the revelation, right? One of the foundations for the whole Torah Ari is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and manifests Himself, itself, Kaviyachol, Ein Sof, in a person's life through concealment. Just like a person is only able to walk out of their house, hopefully, in clothing, right? And so they cover themselves over, but that's what allows themselves to be revealed. It's the same way by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The garment, the in clothing, is itself the revelation. The same is true. Another mashal, if a person looks up at the sun, I'm not sure if this room was better, but okay, tomorrow we'll have to come up with another thing, but if everybody can sort of squeeze in as much as possible. Baruch Hashem. So, if a person wants to look up at the sun, and the sun is an incredibly bright light, and the sun is going to be blinding if a person just looks at it straight, what do? They cover their eyes, right? And they wear sunglasses, or covering your eyes. And it's a paradox, but the truth is that sometimes the covering is itself what enables a person to access, and that's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu works. And so Rabbi Nachman did the same in his sefer. The point of the sefer is to reveal things to us, but the way that Rabbi Nachman reveals is by concealing. And the concealment is the revelation, but at the same time, don't be fooled that you think you understand and we understand it on a pshat. It's hidden, and it requires a person to contemplate these matters very deeply. Because says Rabbi Nosson, like we heard from Rabbi Nachman himself, Amar, one time Rabbi Nachman said that the Torah that he's revealing, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, Rabbi Nachman has lowered yet. Why don't you grab a chair? There's still some room. You can pull a chair in. The next person will have to hang from up there or something. But the next person. Rabbi Nachman said that the form in which he has brought and recorded these teachings in Likutei Moharan is thousands and myriads of times lower than where he was masig them, how he attained them in the Olam Yisrael. Rabbi Nachman makes a reference to this in a different place in Chaim Moran, and I'm always worried to say this over. You'll find this a bit strange, but I once had a very, very definitive and clear dream of the Rebbe, and we were walking together, and only afterwards did I find out that there is a Breslover tradition where Rabbi Nachman reveals himself to people in dreams in a black beard, even though we know from the Breslover tradition that he had a little red beard and long red payas. It's a very slight, thin person, but in beards he shows up with a black beard, and that was my experience. Mama, she had a black beard, and we were walking together, and I asked him, is that based on the teachings of Chaim Moran about how he revealed these teachings? I said, is this how it went? That you Kala Torah Kula, you were massing an idea, and as it comes into your brain, it just filters through all the psukim and everything. And he's like, okay, you're an idiot. That was he sort of winked at me. He's like, all right, nice try. You don't know what you're talking about. type of thing. So, okay. So with that caveat, it does say in Chaim Moharan that Rabbi Nachman sometimes had an idea that came into his mind, and he said, I'm not yet able to bring it down into psukim. I haven't yet found the structure of psukim in order to bring this idea down. And again, I understand for many of us who have not yet tasted the Likutei Moharan, it's going to be difficult to really understand what I mean. You're going to see it because Rabbi Nachman is a tapestry. It's a very different kind of sefer, very different methodology. For those of us who have been learning, you understand what he means, right? So he says there are Torahs that are naked. He says they're just Torahs, which is a patla, because who talks like that? Torah is psukim, right? Says the Rebbe. Well, sure, the way that it shows up for us. But in its source, it's beyond psukim. Torah is just the seichel mufshat. And Sir Rabbi Nachman was saying that Likutei Moharan is the lowest form that he's able to bring these concepts down in a way where we can have some kind of interaction with them, but don't be fooled. It's deep. It's deep, it's deep, it's deep. This is Rabbi Nachman's power. This is Rabbi Nachman's awesome strength. That Rabbi Nachman's incredible lofty intellect, Hisiga attained and found a way found a way to enclose and to bring down into this world lofty and elevated manners, words that are exceedingly holy and delicate and gentle and nuanced. To bring them down into many different kinds of constricted forms, so that they can finally be words that are accessible to every single person. Like I said, you can take practical advice. I held up yesterday Likutei Eitzos. Every lesson, you can take something practical, and at the same time, the greatest Mikubalim are breaking their heads over what he actually said. And the point is, is to bring Hashem back into a person's life in a real way. So you don't need proofs of God's existence. You encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu face to face, panim al panim. Legales eitzos, to reveal eitzos, advice, udrachim, and ways, unasivos, and paths, lahagiel avidasi yisbarach be'emes, in order to attain true avodas Hashem, lemandas kol amei haaretz. And this is very delicate, Be'ez Hashem should bless us. We'll get there to Torah Chav Zayin in a few weeks. You'll see what this means. Rabbi Nachman lays the root for a universal Jewish vision, which was very, very much deepened by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, without a question, maybe more than anybody. Rav Kook also a little bit, Rav Hillel Zeitlin, Rav Leo ben Amozeg. There are a number of tzaddikim that made this their inyan, right? That were bringing back Sheba Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Am Yisrael are here for a mission. But Rabbi Nachman is one of the earliest sources that you find. He focused on the Goyim like nobody else. Because Rabbi Nachman is like bringing down the energy of the Geula, and if you look at all the Nevi'im, they're replete. All the Messianic visions have to do mostly with the Umas HaOlam, and also Sviv Am Yisrael that's activated. Ki Beisi Beis Tfili Yikare L'Chala Amim. And so Rabbi Nachman over here, Nosson, brings this pasuk that Leman Das Kol Amei Haaretz. Rabbi Nachman had a universal vision for all of humanity, and he made comments about this in Chaim Moharan, which we'll learn around Torah Chav Zayin, which is the headquarters for this idea. Also Torah Yud, we'll get there. To reveal to the whole humanity, Ki Hashem Hu Ha'Elikim, that Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, Hu Ha'Elikim, there is no nature, Elikim Gematria HaTeva, it's all Yud Ke Vav Ke. All of life is a direct encounter, an immersive experience in the divine, and that is something that everyone needs to know. Jews, non-Jews alike, Einoid. There's nothing else but HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Reb Nosson, it's a blessing in Yirmiyahu. He says sometimes you have to you have to hold back your words. He says, I'm going to hold myself back laharich, from being very lengthy, from speaking about the incredible, wondrous greatness and the awesome holiness of this fearsome, awesome Sefer. Kimisha Yirtzel Estakal Be'ein Emes, says Reb Nosson, very honestly, as he said everything very honestly, a person who wants to look at the Sefer in truth, I don't need to tell you, you'll just learn it, and you'll see that there's nothing like this. And you'll see how deep these words are. Umishali B'chalak, and says Reb Nosson, if a person intends to fight, and to be misnagid, and doesn't want wisdom and doesn't want a way, I could speak for pages and pages, it's not going to help him. So a person who wants to learn it will see it. A person who doesn't want to see it, no amount of convincing is going to help them see it. It has to be the right time in your life. And usually it has to do with challenge and difficulty. That's when people all of a sudden come running to Rabbi Nachman. That's why I'm not convinced a person's a big misnagid at 38 years old. Okay, come back to me in 10 years, 20 years, we'll see. Sometimes you find that people who are very strong against whatever, life starts to hit a couple of bumps and they mellow out a little bit, and then when they need to breathe, they put on the oxygen mask of Chasidus and Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So, everybody has their moment along the journey. Some younger, Baruch Hashem, Ashreinu. Vuhu, Ulam, L'chol Achai V'Rei, so it says, Rav Nosson, for my brothers and friends, Adarban Ma'at Midarchi HaSefer HaKadosh. So let me teach you a little bit about the ways of the Sefer. And that's why it's important to learn this Hakdamah before going in. So you have a framework. You can put the gem in a setting. This is the setting. Otherwise, you jump in, it can get very confusing. Rav Nosson's going to teach us a little bit about the ways and the methodology of the Sefer, which is absolutely inimitable and unique. There's no Sefer quite like this. The Yesem is a Yir Ba'atzman, says Rav Nosson, I'm going to start you off, and then you'll go out on your journey. Yiru Einehem v'yismach libam, and then your hearts will rejoice. Right, your eyes will see, and your hearts will rejoice. Vuhu. And the methodology is as follows. Ki kol Torah v'Torah, each and every lesson in Likutei Moharan, midivrei HaSefer HaKadosh Hazeh, and the words of this holy Sefer, midaberes mikama v'kama dvarim pratim. Each Sefer is a tapestry of myriad, multiple, specific inyanim in Yiddishkeit. It is, and in that sense, mamish, just off the bat, it's not like any other Sefer because it's not a commentary on anything, and there's no central theme in the lessons, right? So it's not like, it's drushes on Chanukah or Purim, or Shavuos or Pesach or any of the Chagim, or on any other mitzvah or maisim tovim befrat, right? It's not a discourse on tefillin or on a pasuk. It's not like that. These are tapestries, these are journeys throughout Kol HaTorah Kula, utilizing multiple, sometimes tens and tens of psukim and mamari chazal throughout all of Torah Shebiksav and throughout all of Torah Shebal Peh, Nigla, Nister, and weaving them together into a unique tapestry that is well more than the sum of any particular pirush on any of those individual mamari chazal or psukim befrat. Rabbi Nachman brings down a brand new gilui that nobody in Yiddishkeit ever spoke about before, and through that gilui he illuminates, with this you can understand this mamari chazal and this pasuk, and in ways that doesn't just explain them al pi pshat like sometimes you find in a sefer. There's a yesod, and through this yesod, then you can understand. It's a yesod that highlights the sod, not the pshat, the sod of tens and tens and tens and psukim and mamar chazal. Rabbi Nosson's going to say later in the Hakdamah that Rabbi Nachman put into Likutei Moharan the entire Kisvei Arizal. He says, you want to learn the whole Kisvei Arizal? Likutei Moharan contains all of the yesodus of the Ari, but it's not in a Kabbalistic format, right? It's in a way where we can bring it into our lives, b'derech avoida. That's the key thing, is b'derech avoida. And for me personally, when I started my journey, I mentioned last year, I started learning Likutei Moharan at 18 years old, and it's a whole story how that happened, and obviously I grew up in a home. My father's a Breslover Chassid, so I grew up in a home where, Breslov was definitely part of the atmosphere, even though my father had never really taught us Likutei Moharan. I'm just the second boy out of 8, really the youngest, right? But it's mostly girls, and it wasn't that kind of thing. So I don't ever remember sitting and learning Likutei Moharan from my father. But that was definitely put Breslov on the radar without a question. I went to regular schools and so on, and so that was obviously a huge help. But for me, I felt as I started learning Likutei Moharan that even if I'm not able yet to understand it fully, and who can ever say it, I still don't understand it fully. I have to break it to you. We're gonna stutter through this together. It's not like I'm not preaching. We're gonna try our best. I don't understand it. How could I understand it? But I thought to myself, even if I get nothing else, just learning the Sefer, I have in my pocket hundreds and hundreds of psukim and mamar chazal. Right? Meaning outside of Rabbi Nachman's Gilui, you become familiar with hundreds and hundreds of psukim throughout the entire corpus of Tanakh and Mamarim and Torah Shebal Peh. Sometimes you'll hear me quote a line in Torah Shebal Peh, and I know about Peh, not because I know the Gemara about Peh. I know Baruch Hashem, I knew, now I'm rusty, but I mamish knew Likutei Moharan, backwards and forwards. And on some level, and the fluency of psukim and mamar chazal, it mamish. It's a tiyul. It's like an incredible journey through this tapestry. So says Rav Nosson, it's not about anything in particular, But each one speaks about mikama v'kama midas toivos, many different holy traits. Mikama v'kama mitzvahs taraseinu hakdosha, many of the mitzvahs. Me'archakas midas rois, from staying away from many negative midas. V'chol Torah v'Torah midaberes b'dvarim yuchadim, and each Torah speaks about its own cluster, and that's why an algorithm is a very good word for it, right? Because it's a unique entity. Each structure is an entity. It's a universe. It's a galaxy. It's a constellation of all these different energies, and each one is a constellation on its own. So a person who knows Torah Vav, you speak about Torah Vav, it's a universe. You know what Torah Vav is. I can't express this to you. The Maimari Chazal and the Psukim are like limbs of a body, right? But the person is not the limbs of the body, right? The person is the character that expresses through the limbs of the body. Each Torah is an entity. The Psukim, Maimari Chazal, concepts are the body, but through the body is an entity called Torah Vav. It's a personality. It's a universe. Torah Zayim, completely different world. Torah Hey, B'chatzoytzeres, completely different world. Each Torah is a universe, and there are people that spend years on one lesson, deeper and deeper and deeper. Rabbi Nachman said you can see the whole Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh through the lens of each and every particular Torah. And we mentioned yesterday, right? There are tzaddikim that did that. Take Torah Aleph, whole Shulchan Aruch. But Torah Beis, whole Shulchan Aruch. Mashaloi Niskru b'Torah Ashniya, that each Torah speaks about a cluster, constellation of concepts that are distinct from the second, v'chein kulam, and so is for the rest. Keep going. For example, Hatar Maschalas Emar ala Kehanim, which we're going to learn by Ezras Hashem, maybe the end of this week, the beginning of next week. The Torah that begins Emar ala Kehanim, speak to the Kehanim. Here's what it speaks about. This is the body, limbs. Medaberes mitfila. It speaks about prayer, ushmiras habris, shetlim zebazeh, and how a person needs to work on, especially now during Shavim, shmiras habris that's connected to tefillah. And then the third Indian is mishpat. You have to know how to fight with the sword that a person gets. There's shmiras habris and tefillah. And then he speaks about giving tzedakah before davening. And then he speaks about distracting thoughts. And then a very delicate way of learning Torah. And then Makamas HaMishkan speaks about putting up the Mishkan. Speaks about binding our tefillahs, as we're going to learn, to the concept of the tzaddikim that are helping to put our tefillahs together, building up Kayma Shlema. Now Rabbi Nachman is revealing through his links, which are called, as we're going to see, bechinot, which is not a test. We say bechina as a test. Bechina means links between two things. And the reason why I think, this Rabbi Daniel Rowe, right, who we miss very deeply, why Rabbi Nachman would use the word bechina, which really means a test, to demonstrate the spiritual link between two things. When he says, v'zeh bechinas zeh, right? And this is an aspect of this, is because a bechina is a test, right? So zeh bechinas zeh means we tested this is the test of these two things, right? It's like testing the strength of this organism. Zeh bechina zeh, like this is a test. This measures up to that. That measures up to this. Not a perfect clarity in terms of how he explained it, but it's something like that, I think. Anyway, they're all bound together. Now, but like a later Torah, for example, Siman Hey, it speaks about completely different things. Doing mitzvahs with joy, tefillah b'koyach, what that means to daven with strength, etc., etc. And this is true for all the lessons, because all the words of the Sefer are filled with good advice. There's nothing that the Sefer doesn't talk about. Are you ready? Take a deep breath, because here we go. From adultery, from a taiva for money, taiva achila, the taiva for eating, merchakas hakavod v'kas, getting out of kavod and kas and anger, v'kapdana v'ukipidas v'gadlus, and how to get out of being a rigid person, v'gadlus, and having arrogance, umalas emes, and how a person should run after the truth, v'oitzim knus hasheker, and get out of falsity. How to stay away from atzvus and atzlus, depression, laziness, to be careful how we speak, to stay away from those things, how to stay away from looking at things we shouldn't look at, and the pegam, the blemish of all of our senses, from the holiness of our eyes and our ears and our nose and our mouth. That's Torah Ches, I believe. Rabbi Nachman speaks about the 7 openings in the face that are our menorah, and the light of that. If you can be mekadosh our senses, our ears, and our eyes, and our nose, and our mouth. Mikdusha Shabbos v'Yontav Rosh Chodesh, the holiness of these things. Mishalosh Regalim Mechlal, from all of the Shalosh Regalim Bepratis, Mikol Regal v'Regal b'Fnei Atzmai, from each and every regal, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, Ma Mitzvos and Nehugas b'Chol Regal v'Regal, all the mitzvahs of those Yontivs, of the Yom Tovim, Shem Mitzvos Achilas Matzah, V'Isur Chamitzvos Or, Ukriyas HaGada, Arba Koises b'Pesach, V'Chem Mitzvos Sukkah, V'Arba Minim. I don't need to translate this part, right? We know the translation. V'Yishana Rabbi Shmini Atzeres v'Simchas Torah, Umikabalas HaTorah b'Shvuos, Mirash Hashanah, Tkiyas Shofar, Yom Kippurim, Michanako Purim, Mitzitzis v'Tefillin, and Kriyash Mal Tefillah, Mitzdaka v'Talmud Torah, U'Masamata be'Emunah. Rabbi Nachman says such a focus on working. Working is so important. Rabbi Nachman puts a big focus on the avodah of working. It's not a b'diavad, as we're going to learn. It's a big Indian in working. It's a mamash avodas Hashem. Me'amunas chachamim, me'anava, me'yira, va'ava, me'malas haratzah, v'kisufin d'kedusha, the benefit of yearning. How much Rabbi Nachman spoke about the benefit of longing for Kedusha. Whether we speak about the 3 tefillas in the day, Shachris Mincha Marav, all the other kinds of tefillah, namely Espodidus, we'll get there, Torah Chavhei and Tinyana, Torah and Beis, and the first Chelek, that a person needs to speak to HaKadosh Baruch in his own words. The greatness of Espodidus, Rabbi Nachman brought back to Am Yisrael. It's not a new thing Rabbi Nachman was mechadesh. If we take a look in the Hakdamah to Hishtabchas HaNefesh, which is a collection of all of the teachings on tefillah throughout the Breslov corpus, both in Likutei and I think in Likutei Halachas as well. In the Hakdamah over there, Rav Alter Tepliker, I think it is as well. I'm checking with Aiden because he's my Breslov Svarim guy now, Baruch Hashem. Aiden knows. If you need to know anything about Breslov Svarim, Aiden's your man.
Just about the Svarim, not the stuff inside.
Listen, I gotta start something. So over there in Hakdamah, he walks you through the whole Tanakh and shows you how every single one of our Avos and Imais did Espodidus, like on a basic level. Adam and Noach and Avram and Yitzchak Yaakov, all the way through, showing you that Rabbi Nachman was mechadish anything. And this itself is part and parcel of what Rabbi Nachman meant. Take my hand, I'll take you on a new way. But it's not a new way. It's an old way. We just forgot how to be Jews, for God's sake. Literally, for God's sake. We forgot for God's sake. We know how to do the thing, But we forgot what it means to mamish be connected. Lefarshi chasablash Ashkenaz, lefanav Yisbarach, to speak in German. No, to speak, well, there it was German. But to speak in your own words before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, French, English, whatever you like. Bechol yain bein levin koinoi, each day, sheishbach kamayim liba noichach b'nei Hashem, to pour out our hearts before the presence of Hashem. She's akeli skar lavedasis baruch. I want to mamish serve you. It's not daf yomi here and I do this and tick off the things. You understand? It's a different Yiddishkeit. This is avodas Hashem be'emes. Be'emes. Umi goydal malas amirs tehillim, and he's not done. Right? This is what's in the sefer. Tehillim shemazakal tshuva, that it brings a person to tshuva. Mi malas habachil lefnei Hashem Yisbarach, what it means to cry before Hashem. Keben amaschata lefnei aviv, like a child is returning to his father. Mi malas leiv nishbar, how the importance of having a broken heart. Me'achakas ha'atzvos, and getting away from depression. Mi malas hasimcha, the greatness of joy. Shetzich nachriach atzmei b'chol kochos avlias b'simcha tamid, to push oneself to try to be consistently happy. We're going to learn what happiness is. Eitzes neflois, love of the simcha, and advice how to get to joy. Mimalas kedushas Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. Me'inin hamishkan, beis hamikdash v'Yerushalayim. Mignos hamachloikis, how terrible machloikis is. Migodol malas hashalom. So many of Rabbi Nachman's teachings talk about peace. Mitshuva, mitainis, mikedushas hamachshava, the holiness of our minds. Me'archakas machshavei zaros, getting away from negative, distracting thoughts. V'chein mikol advarim ha'adrachim sha'akadoshim shaba'olam hamachracham lakol. All ways, all holy ways that are necessary. Lakol. People say, Breslov is a niche thing. It's just for some people. Let me ask you. This list I just read you. It's a niche thing. Like, who was God's demographic exactly when he came down on Har Sinai? He meant it for every single Yid. And as much as this sefer helps a person activate their Jewishness, yeah, it's for every single person. And if you think that's radical, I'm sorry. That's what it's for. He says it's necessary for everyone. Who doesn't need this? Who? Who doesn't need this? Who doesn't need this as a person is a baldimian to think that whatever level of Yiddishkeit he has, he's satisfied with. Such a person doesn't need this. That means he doesn't need it? No, it means that at this stage in his life, he's not ready to open up. If a person's ready, they need it. They absolutely need it, and you're going to see that yourself. What it means to connect ourselves to a tzaddik, to a soul master. That 99.9% of Yidden don't understand. Connection to its tzaddik, our whole holiness depends on this. Vayaminu ba'Hashem uva Moshe Avdai. Our whole Torah depends on the tzaddik, on Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu, right? In the same sentence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bringing down His presence through tzaddikim. Me'inyan nigun, from the inyan of music, uklei zemer, and instruments. V'asar min negina machamas kafri kudem, and dancing, ve'inyan anachan, and sighing, v'kol havara, and the concept of an echo. Dvarim shaloi shemasan oizen me'olam, things that no ear ever heard. Asher loy nishma v'loy nira, the ear didn't hear, and v'loy nira, and nobody saw. Legali soidos neirois hatzrichim le'olam ha'oid b'dvarim ke'elu. To reveal to the world secrets that are awesome and necessary for the world. Ma'oid. Asher darche Hashem nistru behem ma'oid. That the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are really hidden in them. Va'ayin b'zar shlach. Take a look at the Zohar Kadosh Mashamatlav ma'oid b'soid kol havara, the concept of an echo, etc. The concept of shaking, of shuckling when we learn. And the stars. Every movement that a person makes is full of secrets. Rabbi Nachman spoke about the way Rabbi Nosson was giving over Torah. His hand motions, his movements that you can't describe. So if I would sit on my hands and I would speak, it's different than because part of communication is the body, is the facial expressions, right? And that's what Rabbi Nachman teaches us in his Sefer. Specifically when we do that in a holy way for a davar shebegedusha, clapping during davening, having simcha, and you're going to see. Open your eyes and you'll see. Rabbi Nachman spoke a lot of leva adam to the heart of a person. So much encouragement. Never ever to give up on yourself, no matter what, ever. Not to allow anything that you go through to knock you down. Ever. Action gadol ba'avodas, to be an action, to be stubborn. Not to leave your space to do what you can do. So we're going to learn Torah Kuf Nun Hey, Torah Mem Vav, and Tinyana, and many others. Mem Ches, Ki Chazdi Hashem Lo Samna V'Lo Chal Racham V'Lo Ilam, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu's mercy is forever. V'Chem Miklalius Kol HaTareg Mitzvahs. So now that's Pratos. Then he spoke in general about all the Tareg Mitzvahs, Shabbat Torah, V'Anfeim and their branches, V'Chol Mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, and all the Mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, Miklalius Torah Shabbat and the concept of Torah Shabbat Peh, Min Nigla V'Nister, Halacha V'Kabbalah, Razin V'Razin D'Razin, secrets and the deepest secrets, L'Kulam B'Shem Yikra. Rabbi Nachman treated every single aspect of Yiddishkeit as in this Sefer. U'Mikulam Edaber Kama and about all of these, he binds them all together in unique ways that are unique in each lesson. And then, this is why Rabbi Nachman said that you can't understand the Sefer unless you see the whole thing, is because while in Torah Aleph, for example, Rabbi Nachman is speaking about Yaakov Avinu, as we're going to see B'ez Hashem in a few days, we'll do Torah Aleph and Esav, and binding them into their own unique constellation with the letter Ches and the letter Nun, and Chachma and Malchus and Yetzirah and Yetzirah and whole Torah Aleph. But there are many other lessons where Rabbi Nachman uses and invokes the concept of Yaakov Avinu. But over there it's plugged into a different algorithm. But you don't think that these two Yaakov Avinus connect? Of course they do, right? And so when they connect, the algorithm grows. Somebody once said that he wants to use technology to holographically represent Likutei Moharan. In a holograph. To take the cluster of the lesson and represent it almost like 3D imaging, like in theoretical graphic space, right? Like the time you move your mouse and the thing turns, and then to show how that's connected and bound up with the next galaxy and how they all interconnect because it's one organism. It's each one in and of itself, and then all of it bound up together. And now we're doing shifts. What's going on over here? Thanks for joining us, Rizal. Just so everyone knows, he was with us the whole time on the call.
I was here for when you said the next one is going to have to hang on.
He said, I'm in. Okay. And he spoke about these concepts many, many times. In incredibly novel ways. But the main thing is it's not intellectual. It's super intellectual, but that's not the point. eitzos nifla'os. How do you come out with more humility, with more simplicity, to simply do the eitzos, the advice? That's the depth of Likutei Moharan, is the actual advice. Eich lehiskarev la'Hashem is how to get close to Hashem. And to me, I'll tell you, one of the things also being able to learn Likutei Moharan with the Chaver is that I didn't, even though I grew up in a Breslov home, I didn't grow up with an ideology. I wasn't locked into anything. We weren't Breslov or Hasidim. I was free. And if I wasn't free growing up, right, which I was generally, I sort of freed myself, unfortunately, in my teenage years, that going into it. But I went through a very, very difficult time, and I came to Eretz Yisrael at 17. It was a last-ditch effort. I met the last Rosh Yeshiva, visiting from the last yeshiva, recruiting the last thing, and my brother pushed me to go. I was not going to go to yeshiva. And, okay, Baruch Hashem, he convinced me, and we connected very deeply, and I ended up going to yeshiva. But I could have chosen any path. And I poked around. What spoke to me about Breslov was that whereas I had the sense that certain other demographical movements were focused on one Indian, almost to the exclusion of others. I'm not going to name specific names, but everybody could imagine, right? Some that make Torah their main thing, some that make the concept of Mashiach or Geula the main thing, some that make the concept of Midos or Derech Eretz, Gadlus Adam the main thing, some that Chasidus and they make Shabbos the main thing, some. In Breslov, I found that everything is the main thing. Everything is the main thing. They were willing to quote everyone. That was very attractive to me in the beginning when I opened up Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shachter's Sfarim and he's quoting the Gra and he's quoting the Ben Ish Chai and they're not afraid to quote everyone. They're not challenged or threatened by anybody. They know what they have, and then Adrab, they find Rabbeinu's light in everything and they incorporate it all into it. That was very attractive to me. But this breadth and this willingness to engage equally in every single Jewish concept, to the exclusion of no others. A Breslov to me is just Judaism. Lit, activated, full of spirit and intentionality and consciousness. And that's what it's all about. There's nothing else. There's no Anhagas and Minhagim and Levushim and things. It's just this. I promise you, it's just this. Eich lehiskarev la'Hashem yisbarach. That's what a Breslover cares about. There is nothing else. And to the extent that they care about anything else, they're rachik from Rabbi Nachman's derech. They're forgetting. Because this is what the Rebbe wanted. Lehiskarev la'Hashem yisbarach. That's all that matters. Says Rav Nosson, there is nothing in the Sefer from the standpoint of a mitzvah or a kedusha or holiness or a good advice that is needed for every human being in the world b'chol darga v'darga on every level that isn't mentioned in the Sefer. Rabbi Nachman's thoughts were very, very deep. Because Rabbi Nachman spoke in the general Hakol B'chlal U'Befrat and in details, Kol Ha'olamos, speaking about all the worlds, spiritual worlds, V'Adraga Shabaylam, and all the levels Shal Kol Adam that every person's at, Ka'Katan Ka'Gadol, from a person who's literally holding nowhere to the greatest Gedolim, Meireshus Nikudas HaBriya, Shutchilas HaTzilas, Ad Tachlis Nikudas HaMerka Shalaylam Asiyah Gashmi, from the highest place in the spiritual structure, which we're going to do an overview of before we jump into the Sefer. I'm sorry for the Hakdamahs, but it's really necessary, I promise you. You're going to see. Without Hakdamahs, it's going to be very, very difficult. So we're going to take a few days of Hakdamahs, then we're going to start from Atzilus all the way down into this world. Shadam Oimidulav, this physical world that we stand on. Kol echad ve'echad, each person, lifi mekoymai umadrigasai, in accordance with his place and his spiritual level. Ba'oisa shava azman, at that time wherever you are, min adam hagadol shabagdolim, that is relevant to the greatest of all tzaddikim. Arakatan shabaktanim, that it gesundin shak, that is relevant to the simplest and the smallest of small. Va'afilu hamunacham lamata ba'asar kisrin de mesavusa. And even those people who are sunk into the filth of the filth, the dark of the dark, or Rabbi Nachman calls sha'al tachtis umitachtav, not just hell, under hell. Asher yardu ba'avanisayim, that descended in their sins. Okay, there you go. Ara sha'al tachtis umitachtav, right, into Gehenna and underneath. Lekulam ya'arer. This Sefer wakes up everybody. V'yikatz v'yechaya. And it inspires them and stirs them and enlivens them. Leval yisyashu chas v'shalom and arachim, not to give up. Koi shel yikimun milav. Rabbi Nachman woke up the stumbling person, Milav, with his words, and he strengthened shuddering knees. Okay, one day we'll get there. Simon Zion, about a year and a quarter. Be'ez Hashem, if we do this properly, we'll be back in Yerushalayim. Please let this be in Yerushalayim. I have mamish. This is just, it's like we're getting on a plane. We have to go back to Eretz Yisrael, Chavre. We have to get back to Eretz Yisrael. Be'ez Hashem, we'll conclude Be'ez Hashem in Yerushalayim. We're going to stop here for today. We're going to pause for 2 minutes for questions, and we'll carry on tomorrow from Mikol Davar V'Davar. And like I said, that'll take another day or two. We'll finish the Hakdamah, and then we'll do 1 day of Hakdamah just generally on Pnimius HaTorah, which is basically the Seder Shalshalis, the spheres without which you can't move an inch, in this Sefer or any of the Sefer Pnimius, and then probably early next week we'll see. We'll start.
שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני